Hello guys, today I'm here to talk about architectural arches in Minecraft. Before we start, I'm going to say that I'm not going to showcase every type of arch that you could theoretically build in your Minecraft world. Rather, the purpose of this video is to open up the topic for you guys to start doing your own research and start thinking about these things when you're designing your own Minecraft world. When you're about to build something, I want you to consider what type of arch you're using, what it says about the building, and what kind of geometry goes into making that arch in real life. So we're here in my creative world where I have built 12 common styles of arches, along with a few designs to showcase each one and how you can try to use it in a build. This video has also inspired this infographic, which I'm going to post on the YouTube community tab as well as in my Discord, and if you guys follow me on Twitter or Reddit, it's already been up there for a few days. First things first though, what is an arch? An arch is a curved span that supports a load above it by transferring the weight away from downwards compressive force into the abutments on either side, effectively the pillar parts of the arch. It allows you to make an opening in the side of a building without all the rocks falling down on your head, basically. And an arch is made up of these important parts. So a keystone is the really important part of an arch. It's what holds all the other blocks together. The other blocks in an arch are called the voussoirs. You have your extrados and your intrados, so that just means the outside part of your arch and the inside. Usually these are going to be more or less the same, except in some rare instances. And then we have the abutments, which are just basically the side parts of the arch, and we have the springing line. The springing line is effectively where your arch actually starts. At number 1, we have the rounded arch. A lot of times you'll hear people call this a Roman or Romanesque arch, and that's because this type of arch is really heavily associated with the Roman Empire and with the Christian churches that were built in the Middle Ages in Europe. This is also technically called a semicircular arch because the arch is half of a circle. One thing that I'm going to keep coming back to in this video is understanding the geometry behind these arches. This one is very simple. You effectively think of a circle and then you just cut it in half, and that is our semicircle. If you look at it like this, you can see how it would sort of look like if you wanted to incorporate it into a building. And here I've tried to style it as an old Roman wall. You can imagine this as the entrance to some sort of government building or bathhouse or temple. If you guys are trying to make castles, a lot of castles are going to include some small Romanesque arches. So here we have one that's just using some walls. There isn't any kind of debugging or creative messing around in this one. This one is purely survival. And then here I'm just showing that if you want to go really small, you can use a cauldron, because a cauldron sort of shows a little arch. And if I break this out, you can see even more what it looks like. But here I've just decided to show what it would look like with a window behind it. At number 2, we have the pointed arch. A lot of people are going to call this a Gothic arch because it's often associated with Gothic cathedral architecture from the High Middle Ages. But if we go back to our circular geometry, this is called a two-centered arch. And you can see how it's made up of two circles intersecting to form a point in the middle. If I turn around, you can see how it would look in a building, and here we have tried to use it for some kind of Gothic cathedral with dark stained glass windows. So here we have a little Gothic arch, a sort of taller Romanesque arch almost, and then here we have another little tall pointed one. If we come back here, you'll see that these are really easy to make with stairs and walls. So I started with the semicircular and pointed arches because those are the ones that most people are going to want to build in Minecraft. But if we're looking at things historically, the first kind of arches you're going to see are triangular arches. So here you can see we're not even using a circle. This is basically just using the power of the triangle to divert some of the force outwards. It isn't as good as a circular arch, and you will almost exclusively see these on very old buildings like this one. So for my example here, if we come through here, I've tried to make it look like there is a triangular arch on some kind of old building made up of cobblestones and a thatch roof. At number 4, we have something very similar, which is the corbelled arch, also known as a false arch. It's a false arch because it doesn't technically work like an arch. You effectively just have little stones jutting out at the sides, supporting the ones above them. I'll put up a picture now of what it looks like. And like the triangle arch, you'll mostly find this in very old buildings. The ancient Greeks used to use this one a lot, And if we come over here, I've come up with a little design for one that is reminiscent of the Aztec. or Mayan people in central Mexico. Here I've gone for a sort of overgrown jungle facade, and this one is using debugged walls, but you could also make this at a bigger scale without using any kind of debugging or creative tricks. We have here number 5, the segmented arch, also known as a Syrian arch. You'll notice these all have multiple names because it's really hard to pin down a specific universal name for something so broadly used as an arch. So the segmented arch is effectively a Romanesque or circular arch. So the segmented arch essentially uses one segment of the semicircular arch. So instead of using half of a circle, we're only using about a third. This is really common in two places. One of them is in these small brick arches that you'll sometimes see over windows and doors in old buildings. And another one is in bridges. Because if you want to make a big bridge spanning across a really wide river, having to do an entire semicircular arch every time is going to take up a lot of construction material. And behind us, you can see that I have tried to go for one of those brick ones. It's a little bit hard to show in Minecraft at this scale, but you kind of get the effect where you're only using a small portion of the arch here, and this one I've made stick out of the building using some trapdoors and half slabs. At number 6, we have the basket handle or three-centered arch. This one is also going to be very commonly used in bridges. If you see behind me, we have gone for a basket handle arch for this little mossy cobblestone bridge we have here. So again, the benefit of doing this is that we don't have to go for a full arch and use up all that material. We can go for something a little bit more slender. Referring to the three center part, I'm going to put up a diagram now showing where the three circles in this arch are. At number 7, we have the Tudor arch, also known as the four-centered or Persian arch. So again, these are where the circles are. And it is going to look a lot like a three-centered arch, except that it has a little piece that sticks out in the middle. Here, I've tried to go for a big Tudor window. You can imagine if you're making a big Tudor-style mansion or government building, you might want to go for a window sort of like this. So at the top here, we have a Tudor arch or the four-centered arch. And then in here, we're using some smaller ones. So these are technically sort of Gothic arches, and so are these. So one of the really fun parts of arches is that once you know how they all work and how they all fit together historically, you can find some cool ways to smush them together. So speaking of Gothic arches, at number 8, we have the pointed trefoil. Trefoil means three-leaved, and in this case, it is essentially another three-centered arch. But in this case, the centers are going to look a little bit different. So we have one right in here, one right in here, and then our third one is up right in here. Of course, I'm trying to show these all at a similar scale so that you can see how they all sort of mimic and interact with each other and where the differences are. But you can try to do these at any scale that really fits for your build. And of course, the bigger the arch is, the easier it's going to be. And as you get into some of these smaller arches, it's going to be a lot more difficult. And you'll really see that going forward because some of these are a little bit hard to show at this scale. But this is a common sort of arch in Gothic architecture. And if I come behind us, you'll see I've tried to show a little example of what one could look like. This one does use some debugging, but again, we're going for a sort of Gothic cathedral with stained glass windows. Here we're using redstone lamps. And here we have our big abutments on the side. We have a little arch here, a little self-contained arch here, and then a taller one up there. So again, you can sort of play with these designs. As long as you understand the basic sort of function and the way that these arches work, you can have a lot of fun with them. At number 9, we have something very similar, which is the pointed cinquefoil. So this one is very similar, except we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 arches in this one. This one is also very common in Gothic medieval architecture, but the whole idea of doing these little foils is not strictly related to the Gothic, and you don't have to restrict yourself to 3 or 5. You can go all the way up to what's called a multifoil. So if you look at this picture of the arch in the Alhambra in Spain, you can see that there are a ton of little mini arches supporting this big, larger arch. So this is kind of how the foil system works. You combine a ton of small, tiny circles together and you come up with a big arch out of the whole thing. That being said, for this design, we have chosen to go for something a little bit more modern. So this one speaks to me as something that's more modern, almost something like 19th century or 20th century. Something like a department store or some kind of big mall. You can see we're going for a sort of colorful design with dark prismarine and warped. We have a little sort of chain balcony down here. Some details for the building, and then you can imagine that this is supporting some kind of upper layer. And here we have it. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, and then 5. This one is on a 4. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4 there. And you can see that this one is on 5 like the rest of these arches. So because we have tried to smush it in a bit, it has a really different shape, but it is still using these same principles. Here at number 10, we have the OG arch. So this is a very common type of arch. You'll see this a lot in Arabian or Mughal architecture in India. You'll also see this a ton in Gothic architecture in Europe, and you'll see it in a ton of other places. An OG arch doesn't have a set amount of circles that make it up, but it does focus on something that I'm going to show over there, which is that we can use circles going in different directions. So this one is basically a 3-center OG arch. So there is a big circle here, then there's sort of a really big circle over here and a really big one there, and they sort of combine to form this big pointed arch. If we look behind us, we could see what it would look like with some bricks. And up here, I have a doorway where we have 2 OG arches, one on top of the other. At number 11, we have the keyhole or horseshoe arch. This one is often associated with the Middle East, again, like the OG arch, as well as with India. And you can actually combine these two, so you can make a pointed horseshoe arch. And if you want to get crazy with it, instead of bringing out these red nether brick walls here, you could bring out this yellow wall, bring it to this level, and sort of close off the whole thing a little bit more to have a narrower archway. This one sort of works on a 2-center principle, so you could see that there is a sort of small arch here that is missing its top, and then we have the real proper arch over here. And turning behind us, you could see another design. This one is made out of brick. You can see our keystone arch up here. And over here, you could see a design that's trying to be really small. This one is using a couple of different layers. But here we have one on a 3 instead of a 5. I think it looks pretty good. And at number 12, we have our inflexed arch. So this is an arch made up out of 2 circles basically colliding. We have a big one here and a big one here. You won't see a lot of these by themselves out in the real world, although you might see 1 or 2. But mostly the point of this is to show that other arches, especially the OG arch, are made up out of smaller types of arches. So in this case, we can basically put an inflexed arch on top of something like the keyhole, and we can combine it to make an entirely new shape. Just by itself, though, I have tried to show what it would look like as a little adornment for a window. So here you can imagine something like a 19th century window, and we have our 2 little circles, one there and one there, framing the window. That is going to do it for today, guys. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned a thing or two. And I hope that this has sparked your curiosity to go out and look more into arches and figure out what kind of arch best suits your builds. If you enjoyed, please leave a like, comment, subscribe. If you want to hang out, come join the Discord in the description down below. And I'll see you guys next time.